Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze the main tactical themes in Arsenal's 5-0 win over Norwich City. So in today's video, first we're going to focus on how both sides look to press, then we'll shift to Arsenal's attacking shape, and lastly we'll briefly analyze how Arsenal were able to succeed in the wide areas. So when we break down the game and we do look at the board, the only real change that we witnessed from Arsenal's starting 11 was that White started at right back for the injured Tomiyasu, and Holding slid into a center back role alongside Gabriel. We witnessed Norwich City play in a 4-2-3-1 as well, so the pressing structure should have been the same for the most part here. What we ended up witnessing was that Pukki was stepping towards the center backs, and Dowell was tasked with closing down Thomas Partey, as the midfield battle should have been Dowell versus Thomas Partey, Gilmour stepping to Xhaka, and McLean tracking the movement of Odegaard. So what we ended up seeing was that if Dowell looked to help press one of the center backs, he'd be blocking off the passing lane into Thomas Partey, and vice versa. So if Pukki had to drop off deeper for Dowell to push to one of the center backs, that would work as well. But for the most part, they were tasked with dealing with Thomas Partey, specifically when Norwich City dropped off into two banks of four. That means that Poeta and Sargent would deal with Tierney and White, and then you'd have Aarons and Williams against Saka and Martinelli. In those situations, McLean has to step forward to close him down, and then you need one of the center backs to close down Odegaard. What ended up happening here was that Arsenal were still able to find ways to bypass that press, because even if you do have Gabriel and Holding being closed out of the game, Ramsdale does serve as an outlet towards Thomas Partey. In those situations, McLean has to step forward to close him down, and then you need one of the center backs to close down Odegaard, and in most situations, he was able to drop off freely into his own half. The reason why they wanted Pukki and Dowell to stick towards Thomas Partey was that if Odegaard dropped off into that midfield zone, McLean would be able to track his movement, and while we did witness that on a few occasions, Odegaard still did a very good job of linking play with his teammates and retaining possession for Arsenal. And even in the situation where Odegaard drops in towards his own half to receive the ball and is closed down by McLean, what we also witnessed was that Lacazette was able to drop off freely into his own half, with neither of the center backs consistently tracking his movement, and that was also an outlet for Arsenal to bypass that press. That's where you need Kabak or Gibson to stick tight towards him to limit Arsenal's ability to bypass the Norwich City press. But ultimately, Arsenal didn't really encounter many issues with that Norwich press, as the center backs were able to bypass the front two to get Thomas Partey on the ball, or it was simply down to Odegaard and Lacazette dropping off into the midfield zone to overload that area and give Arsenal more options against a front six that was looking to stop Arsenal from building attacks out of the back. Here you can see the Norwich City press in full effect, with White, Holding, and Thomas Partey being closed out, and that's where you see Ramsdale fizzing the ball into that midfield zone for Odegaard dropping into his own half. He does drag away a defender, but look what Odegaard's first instance is to do. He ends up sliding the ball out into the wider area for Saka near the right touchline, and from there Saka slides the ball across Williams for Odegaard to progress Arsenal's play into Norwich City's final third. As we've seen in previous weeks, Arsenal's pressing was a bit more simplistic and effective, and it remained with Lacazette and Odegaard leading it from the front, but there were times where we ended up seeing Kabak being closed down by Martinelli, Tierney stepping towards Aarons, and then that would leave Sargent free and Gabriel would step forward to close him down. If that wasn't the case, the press was pretty much straightforward. It was Lacazette closing down one of the center backs, Martinelli dealing with Aarons, Tierney tight on Sargent, and because Dowell did play a key role in that midfield zone as potentially a spare man if Odegaard was stepping towards Gibson, then you would see Gabriel stepping forward to close down Norwich City's number 10. Because what we ended up seeing was that McLean and Gilmour were dropping off deeper to receive the ball, and on a few occasions we ended up seeing Xhaka stepping forward in towards Norwich City's third to close down Gilmour, while Thomas Partey stuck with McLean. In the build-up to Arsenal's opener, as Kabak sliding the ball across Martinelli and Tierney stepping into Aarons to win possession, and when he does that, focus on Odegaard, Lacazette, and Saka in pockets of space behind the Norwich City midfield bank. That ultimately results in Tierney sliding the ball across three Norwich City defenders into the path of Lacazette, and from there when he does look to receive the ball, you could see that McLean's looking to step forward to recover, and he slides the ball into the path of Martinelli, making a run across Kabak, and from there Martinelli squares a first time ball into the path of Odegaard unmarked ahead of Gibson and Williams, and that results in Odegaard sliding the ball across Williams for Saka, which places him in this 1v1 position with no protection, and from there he's able to cut onto his left foot and put Arsenal ahead. Therefore, when you focus on how Arsenal were able to bypass Norwich City's two banks of four, we didn't really witness much of a substantial shift from their overall attacking shape. At times it did look like a narrow back four, but for the most part it was about Tierney pushing forward, Gabriel shifting across, and White was holding a deeper narrow position, and he was very reluctant to push forward. There were times where Saka did get on the ball and you drag markers towards him and White would push forward to support, but we rarely witnessed any overlapping runs. Ultimately, the key to Arsenal's success here was the positioning of their attacking players. It starts in the midfield zone with Thomas Partey getting the ball beyond Pukki and Dowell to play forward passes, but beyond that we start with Xhaka, who normally drops off into an inside deeper left position, and that creates space for Tierney to push forward. In previous models of Arteta's attacking shape, that would see the left-sided player dropping off into the gap between Sargent and Gilmore to allow Tierney to push forward, whereas in this example you have Gabriel near the halfway line and he's sliding the ball out to Xhaka, dropping to an inside left position, and that will pull out Dowell, and as you can see you have Martinelli in a central area who is occupying Aarons, and Tierney pushing forward to peg back Sargent. But in the earlier stages, what we ended up witnessing was that Martinelli was hugging the touchline and forcing Aarons towards it, and then you'd see Tierney adopting a deeper narrow position. That's where we ended up seeing Xhaka pushing forward beyond Sargent and Gilmore, and that forces Sargent to tuck in a bit narrow to try and close off that passing lane. From there, Arsenal's backline or Thomas Partey could slide the ball out freely towards Martinelli, and that allows him to run at Aarons, with support from Xhaka continuing his forward run towards Kabak and forcing Gilmore or Sargent to drop off deeper for cover. Once again, you witness Gabriel just ahead of Gilmore and Sargent, and Xhaka in that pocket of space behind them, which allows Gabriel to slide the ball across Sargent into the path of Tierney, breaking down that left channel as Martinelli is occupying Aarons. If that wasn't the case, you'd end up seeing Martinelli looking to shift central, and that would create space for Tierney to push forward. But in those situations, Arsenal were looking to maximize that overlapping run beyond Sargent, as once again, he was often caught central in those positions. And then if we shift back to Norwich City's pressing, there were times where you ended up seeing McLean, like I said, stepping towards Odegaard and Gilmore picking up Thomas Partey. And from there, that would force Sargent to shift over towards Xhaka as Norwich City were looking to close down that midfield zone. And from there, that created space for Tierney to make runs off Sargent down that left channel as Martinelli was often occupying Aarons. Here you see Thomas Partey receiving the ball just beyond Pukki and Dowell, and you have Lacazette dropping between McLean and Gilmore into his own half, and Odegaard in space just beyond Poeta and McLean. From there, Thomas Partey opts to slide a diagonal ball across Sargent into the path of Martinelli to place him in a 1v1 with Aarons. As that play develops and Martinelli carries the ball towards the edge of the box, you can see that cover does come across for Aarons, and Martinelli looks to slide the ball across the right back into the path of Tierney. In the penalty area, Xhaka and Saka are occupying Gibson and Williams. But when Tierney does receive the ball near the byline, he opts to pull it back into the path of Lacazette or Odegaard, but the pass is unsuccessful. In the build-up to Arsenal's second goal, you witness Martinelli receiving the ball freely in the right channel and splitting McLean and Poeta for Odegaard dropping between the lines. When Odegaard receives the ball, he's now free to turn central, and that's where he locates Tierney, making an overlapping run beyond Sargent, and you could also see Lacazette occupying Aarons. When that pass is played, Tierney now has a free lane to carry the ball into left half space, and he takes his first touch into that zone, and from that position he could slide the ball across the box for Saka for a tap-in, but he fires a low effort beyond the keeper. So if Xhaka wasn't dropped off into that pocket of space and creating avenues for Martinelli to receive the ball on the touchline or Tierney to make overlapping runs, then from there he was looking to push forward to get himself into advanced positions, peg back Gilmour, or look to occupy a center back. Here we witness an Arsenal move where Martinelli's in a 1v1 with Aarons, and he squares the ball into the path of Xhaka ahead of Kabak looking for the return pass. When Xhaka receives the ball, that's where you end up seeing neither Kabak or Williams stepping towards him, and he plays a first-time ball between the two Norwich City defenders for Martinelli continuing his run off Aarons' shoulder into left half space. And from that position, Xhaka's pass places Martinelli in the area where he could play the ball across the 6-yard box for a Saka tap-in, but he ends up fizzing his effort into the path of Gunn. Therefore, when we shift to Odegaard and Lacazette, what you end up seeing is that Arsenal were looking to overload that central area, as Odegaard was dropping off into the gap between McLean and Poyeta, and Lacazette was dropping off the center backs in towards Gilmour and McLean. So when you look at how Arsenal are looking to stretch this Norwich City backline, if the ball is shifted out to White, Poyeta is looking to step forward to close him down, and then that creates an avenue for Odegaard to drop off into a larger gap of space if White slides the ball across Poyeta, drops it off to Holding to play it into that gap, or squares it to Thomas Partey to play it into that gap. You have Odegaard dropping off into that space, Xhaka dropping in between Gilmour and Sargent, and that creates space for Tierney, and then Lacazette dropping into that midfield zone to ensure that neither McLean nor Gilmour can shift towards Xhaka or Odegaard because they have to be aware of his presence in between the lines. There were several occasions throughout that game where this overload simply worked for Arsenal to bypass that midfield press, whether it be one of those three dropping off the ball to Thomas Partey and then him finding another gap, or simply looking at those options. What you end up seeing is that one of the fullbacks will be pulling away one of the wider players, and from there you end up seeing a 4v2 or a 4v3 if Dowell doesn't track back. But nevertheless, there was several passing options for Arsenal to bypass that midfield bank, as Xhaka, Odegaard, and Lacazette were dropping off into large gaps of space to receive the ball. Therefore, when we shift to the right-hand side, what ended up happening there was that Saka was often looking to get into 1v1s with Williams, and from there you could see Odegaard receiving the ball and sliding the ball up to Saka to help progress the play. But what ended up happening here was that even though Odegaard was then looking to push forward, what we often saw was that Poyeta and McLean were able to drop off deeper to make up the numbers. But the problem that Norwich City encountered here is that although they did do that, when Saka was looking to get into a 1v1 with the left back, neither McLean, Gibson, or Poyeta were dropping off deeper to stick tight near Williams to make it a 1v2, so there was no cover for the left back, and Saka was able to get the ball into gaps of space to create chances for his teammates or present a legitimate goal-scoring option. This is an example of Norwich City's issue down that left-hand side, as you see that they're initially set up in a 1v3 against Saka, with Odegaard at the edge of the box and Gibson tracking his movement. But as that play develops, although Williams does have protection from two Norwich City players, none of them look to drop off with Williams to protect him against Saka, so you see Poyeta and McLean both ball watching, and that's where Saka is able to carry the ball to the byline and cut onto his left foot, and from there that creates enough space for him to pick out Lacazette, making a run across Aarons at the edge of the 6-yard box, but from this position he nods his effort wide of the net. In the build-up to Arsenal's third goal, you witness Saka receiving the squared ball from Lacazette, and focus on Odegaard's movement across McLean into right half space. When Odegaard makes that run, he drags away Gibson, and now you can see that it's 1v1 against Williams with Lacazette just ahead of Kabak. What's integral here is that Lacazette now makes a forward run into the penalty area, and then focus on Odegaard's movement. Lacazette is now around 3 Norwich City defenders, and Saka's in a 1v1 as Odegaard looks to shift over to the right channel. As the play develops, now you see a 2v1 being created as Gibson doesn't shift over to Odegaard, and Lees, Melu, or neither of the wide player are looking to drop back to help out Williams. That creates space for Saka to cut across Williams, and because no one steps towards Saka, he's able to fire a low effort beyond the keeper. So as you can see, this was another comfortable win for Arsenal that was built around effective pressing and improved wide play that featured Tierney's overlapping runs down the left and Saka's improved direct goal threat from the right.